A deadly early morning house fire in Dexter, Missouri claims the lives of 2 children and an adult. Crews say they were called to the Truett Street where multiple people were inside trapped in the home. Now investigators are trying to find a cause of the fire. Blake Showalter is live at the scene with the latest. Blake.
Ellie, I'm outside of what was a deadly house fire here in Dexter that took place around 2 a.m. this morning. Officials say there was 13 people inside of the home when the fire took place, with 3 of those people tragically losing their lives. One being a mother, two of them being children, one as young as 5 years old. I talked to the fire chief here in Dexter, who says the 2 children that were inside of the house when the fire took place actually lived in surrounding areas inside the neighborhood and were only staying the night. I also spoke to one of the parents of one of the children that lost their lives. He says his wife was also in the fire at the time it took place and is recovering in the hospital. They also found out his wife is pregnant. The fire chief also says that this investigation is currently ongoing, and we'll have more information and update you as soon as we can.